and welcome to the Everything Weather Podcast, where we talk with people about the weather world, explore and discuss everything weather, and have a little fun along the way. I'm your host, Kyle David, and it is great to be back with you on the Everything Weather Podcast. There's been a little bit of a gap between this episode that I'm doing right now and the last episode that we did with Tom DiLiberto. Before we talk about why there was a gap, I just wanted to quickly say that and give an update on Tom DiLiberto. He's now working with Climate Central as part of their media team that's talking about the weather and climate story. So real quick, congratulations to Tom on the new role at Climate Central. And I just wanted to update you all on where he's at in the weather and climate world. Now getting back into why there was that gap. For those that have been listening from day one, I've been working on my master's in communication degree with Johns Hopkins. By the time we got to that last episode, I was in the middle of wrapping up that degree, which I'm happy to announce that I've officially completed and I've graduated with my master's in communications. In that short time as well, I quickly started up a new full-time job with ABC News as one of their new meteorologists and weather producers. And between those two things and other personal things that were going on, it was a whirlwind with everything going on, and I had not been able to edit the episodes that I had recorded and then also do new episodes, record new episodes for the podcast. But I'm happy to announce that the episodes that I've already recorded are now edited. I can now release them to you guys and bring you new Everything Weather podcast content. And before we get into what those episodes are, what the future of the podcast will be, I have a quick announcement on a big milestone that we've reached, or I feel like it's a big milestone. We have reached 1,000 downloads for the podcast. It may not sound like a lot over the 25 plus episodes that we've done so far, but in my books, it is a huge milestone. And it's really exciting to have done this podcast and share my love with the weather and also talk with people about the weather and have some fun along the way as well. So I want to thank you, the listener, whether you just started listening to this podcast or you've been listening from day one. Thank you so much for getting us to this big milestone. Without the podcast, I would not be where I am today, literally, because one of the people that I got to talk to, Dan Peck, he's also working at ABC News. And had I not been able to network with him and talk with him about his experiences, I very likely would not have gotten the job at ABC News because I probably wouldn't have heard of it. He would not have heard of me. So it just goes to show the power of podcasting and networking. Without this podcast, I literally would not be where I am today. So thank you all for listening to the podcast. Thank you to all the people who have given their time to make this podcast a thing. And before we get into this episode, I have one more announcement, and it's a sad one. I'm announcing that this podcast will be going on hiatus after this batch of episodes is released. And that's because I want to focus on my new job with ABC News. I want to focus on the opportunities that come with it. And not only the opportunity of working with all the awesome people there, including Ginger Z, who has had incredible experience in communicating the weather and climate, but also the new opportunities that will come in the weather world. But this is not a permanent goodbye. I will eventually be returning to do this podcast. This is just a see you later for now. So that being said, I encourage you still to share the podcast with your friends, your family, colleagues, anybody you know who likes talking about the weather, likes to listen about the weather, and also have some fun as well, because it's still relevant to 2 days, 5 days, weeks, months from now. It still will be relevant. There's a lot of great content, and I encourage you to share that with everyone that you know who wants to learn more about the weather or just wants to have fun along the way. And with that as well, also still follow us on social media, because when we eventually come back, it's just going to bring a stronger start back when I'm able to get back into this podcast. Now, with all that out of the way, thank you so much to listening to the Everything Weather podcast. Let's jump into this episode. Today on the podcast, we are excited to have Steven DiMartino. Steven is a certified digital meteorologist, also known as a CDM, and a prominent figure in the field of private meteorology. He's the owner and consulting meteorologist for NYNJPA Weather, a company he founded in 2007, which provides personalized and accurate weather forecasting services for individuals, businesses, and government entities across the 3 states. His expertise spans meteorology, environmental science, and operational impacts of weather, making him a versatile leader in the field. And he is also lending his expertise to the American Meteorological Society to their board of certified digital meteorologists. Hey there, Steven, and welcome to the Everything Weather podcast.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to talking about your experiences, talking about forming NYNJPA weather, and some insights for the world of forecasting and private meteorology. But first, I've got a fun game for you. We've got what is on the weather person's playlist. So everybody we do this game. I ask what's on the weather person's playlist. So Steven, what is on your weather play or your music playlist?
Oh, it's a wide variety. Of course, we have to start off with Metallica. That's going to be number one. And then you go to Meatloaf. I know it goes completely other direction, but notice in this theme, there's going to be a lot of emotional singing, powerful, right? Then you go to Slipknot, Disturbed, Fort Minor, Falling in Reverse. They're new, well, relatively new compared to my list. Let's see, Eminem. Can't just as a Gen X, you can't. Absolutely. Nine Inch Nails, Beastie Boys, and the Chemical Brothers. There's my
It,
top 10.
that's quite the playlist. It's hard to pick the top 10 artists. As somebody who loves a whole bunch of different music and genres. And just to do a quick, like, impromptu game, if you had to build your own musical supergroup, say you got the Barometric Brashers or whatever meteorology weather titled band, and you're creating a supergroup, who's going to be in this supergroup of yours?
Oh, man. It's hard to, I probably do a mix of like these days, I'd probably want to do new and old. So I'd do a mix of in Reverse and Metallica and see how that would work because it's two different sounds that I think that could grow together. And I think it would be insane. But that's where I would go.
Okay. Who would you rather have as your frontman vocalist? James Hetfield or Ronnie Radke? For those that don't know, James Hetfield is Metallica, Ronnie Radke is Falling in Reverse.
I think I'd probably do Ronnie for more of the powerful. Like I think that they could work together, but I think that Ronnie being younger and younger voice, I think it would be able to pull off the more powerful notes.
Yeah, he's very versatile too. He can do screaming, he could do powerful singing, he could do rapping.
Yeah,
There are a
he's
few
all over
people
the
in
place.
Yeah, there
His
are a few
albums
people who can do
are
that.
amazing.
There's some good songs out there, and I'll say there's some good songs from the new one. I think my most interesting song from them is the one they did with Jelly Roll. All My Life, I think it is.
And the thing is that if you listen to his whole album, the whole collection of music, it goes in so many different directions, and the versatility is just really amazing to listen to. So whatever your mood happens to be in, you could probably find if you feel like just having a good time, having a good laugh, you got some stuff like that. If you feel angry, you got some stuff with that. There's just a wide variety of different ways to go about it.
And on that note, is there a particular type of music or a particular artist that you listen to during specific events? Say, like you're forecasting for winter weather or you're forecasting for severe weather. Is there a particular genre or artist for each of those?
Sometimes ahead of it, maybe like Metallica, when I'm working out, these stuff, Nine Inch Nails, Disturbed, Slipknot, of course, Falling Reverse. Sometimes you throw in some Eminem. It just depends on how you're feeling. But most of the time, I listen most of my music either when I'm driving in the car with my wife. We got a lot of Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that. And then when I'm working out, some more heavier stuff because you're working out.
And what about the post event? You're done covering everything and starting to dial down. What's your go to song or artist for that?
Normally, when I'm dialing down, I move away from music and start putting on sci-fi shows like Star Trek. To be honest with you, I don't really listen to. Maybe if I need to really calm down, I'd probably go more classical, like Bach, stuff like that. Just more instrumental, just to chill out.
That's a good pick. And before we get into our conversation about your weather story, I have to ask, what is your favorite Star Trek series?
Man, well, I grew up watching Next Generation, right? So that's always near and dear to me. I can't get into Voyager as much. I try to, but it just doesn't But I love Deep Space Nine. I really enjoy that.
And I'm a younging too, so these shows were well before my time. But my mother grew up on these shows, and my first show was Next Generation. But I've fallen in love with Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it goes in a lot of different directions, and you pretty much get everything. It's a lot like the older Star Trek in terms that you have action, you have some political stuff, you have a lot of different commentary, and of course, you get wars and starships and all that other stuff. So it's a mix of everything.
And it's got a, I want to say like it's darker storytelling to it. Like the original series, Next Gen, was very optimistic. Deep Space Nine had this darker tone to it. I think I appreciated it a little bit more. It was a little more like, hey, this is not as optimistic as Gene Roddenberry, the creator of the show, painted, because you have the Dominion War, the Borg. Not to get too much into Trek, because this is a weather podcast, but I love that. Deep Space Nine is probably one of my favorite shows. But with that said, that's our first fun section, which kind of dived into some television shows a little bit. Let's get now into your weather story. So everybody I have on the podcast, I talk with them about the weather story. And in the business, we refer to the weather story as what's the day's weather, what's the week's weather, what's coming up with the weather. But here, I talk about it in the context of past experiences, things that have gotten you interested in the weather along the way. So with that said, Steven, tell me about your weather story and what got you interested in everything weather.
Well, I think like a lot of meteorologists, you just get born into it. I've been interested in weather since I could remember. When I was a little kid, 2, 3 years old, I was fascinated by the snow, how it changed everything, turned everything white. I was really interested in that. And then as I got older, once I went into elementary school, I was able to find books. I'd read all the weather books that were in the library. I just loved it. And I wanted to find out. I think from a young age, I always wanted to figure things out. And if there is one topic that is very difficult to figure out, it is the weather because it's complete chaos. And I think that I got really interested in the challenge of forecasting because I would see other forecasts go bad and I would wonder, gee, I wonder if I could do better. I wonder if I could figure it out. So I probably was the only kid on my neighborhood that while everyone else was excited to put on their favorite TV show, I'd put on the Weather Channel. So I was always interested in that whole field. And I love watching guys like John Hope talk about hurricanes every 45 minutes after the hour. Jim Cantori. The cool thing about Jim Cantori is that this was an individual who was Italian like me, but on the TV. And he had great suits on. He looked great. He was very intelligent. He explained everything. And it was almost like having a professor every day and learning all the different little cues, and especially when he pulled up the water vapor satellite picture. So I always loved that. And of course, I started to get more and more into it. I try to figure out the storms, and I would tell my teachers, we don't have to do homework tomorrow. We're going to have a snow day tomorrow. So in elementary school, they would ask me, hey, what do you think about the weather? Then in middle school, I started writing columns about the weather and doing my own forecasting. And then finally, we got to high school, and I started to do the weather forecast on the loudspeaker every morning. And that was a lot of fun. I did that from sophomore year through senior year. And it was just an amazing experience. And I got to do other announcements too, but that helped me break out of my shell because I'm more naturally very reserved and quiet to myself. And I need to learn how to communicate to other people, especially if I'm going to do a forecast. So that actually pushed me to break out of my shell. It was really a great experience. I really can't say enough about the amazing teachers at Freeholboro High School in Freehold, New Jersey, because they helped me quite a bit in being able to harness that ability. So after that, I had a couple of colleges to pick from, and I decided to go to SUNY Oswego. And the reason why, aside from the fact that it had this amazing magical power called lake effect snow, which I was really excited about, I love the classes, and this is one thing I always tell a lot of younger kids looking for meteorology. Don't worry about the school names. School names don't matter, okay? They really don't, okay? It's a lot of nonsense. Go to the school where you're going to learn the best, how you like to learn things. Are you comfortable in a large class? with 1,000 people and they're all trying to get an answer. And I didn't like the idea of me paying so much for college. And then the only person I'm going to talk to is a person who she's just 4 years ahead of me. So I wasn't up for that. And some of those schools, they had that. And I wasn't interested in that. Oswego allowed me to go talk to the professor directly and probably drive them insane with some of the questions I had. But that was really important to me because if I'm going to learn, I need to be able to talk to somebody who's going to push me to be better. And there's a lot of great professors. Dr. Ballantyne was very difficult with synoptic meteorology. He'd make you stand up in front of the class and explain your forecasting, and he'd just tear it apart, right? But it taught you how to present your theory, how to present your idea of how to forecast, and how to respond when someone has a different point of view. And I think that's something that is very lacking in our education today because you have to be able to take in other ideas and test it to see whether or not, does this make sense? Should I have considered this? Should I incorporate it in the way that I go through my processes? Do I throw some things out? And that's how you grow as a scientist. You have to take in failure and understand it and then grow from it. If all you do is shield yourself from that, sure, you feel good, but in the end of the day, you're just ignorant. And that doesn't help anybody. And then another great professor that I ran into, which rubbed off me quite a bit, because I was not a fan of math, but this man, Dr. Scubis, was, I've never seen someone so excited about doing calculus in my entire life. Not even the calculus teachers at college were excited about doing the math. But because of that, I'm still nowhere near as enthusiastic about doing multivariable calculus like he was. But I learned how taking those equations and understanding them, you can find model error. And by finding model error, you can be ahead of the game and not rely on models. It doesn't matter what model A or B is doing. What does the physics say? What is the actual environment of the atmosphere that you're working with? And by doing that, the only way to do that is by understanding the mathematical equations involved and sometimes doing the math yourself. So that is my educational background. I went off to Oklahoma for my first job. Now, before that, just so some of you guys know out there, I know that in our current state, as of this recording, there's a lot of craziness going on with the federal government and young meteorologists out there. I started right after college working at Vitamin Shop, which for some of you guys that don't know is like a little retail vitamin, protein drinks, all that type of stuff. Not exactly the glamorous job I was looking forward to when I got right out of college, but hey, bills are important, so you got to pay them, right? So I did that for a bit, and then I got a job going, and I went out to Oklahoma, much to the horror of my mom, who was very concerned about me going out to the central part of the country, but it was an amazing experience. So I went out to Oklahoma, I got my first apartment, and started forecasting for the Northeast. I had to go out to Oklahoma to forecast for New Jersey, which was ironic, but okay. And it was a great job working for another private weather company that was later bought out by AccuWeather. It was called Weather Bank, and it was a very interesting experience. It taught me a lot of things about not only forecasting, because I got to forecast for California and Europe and all over North America, and it gradually got to the point where I was a manager, head manager, vice president, whatever you want to call it back then, for all of the Northeast. And it was a great experience. But there came a point, and perhaps it was because of the lack of pizza, good pizza, or just missing family, where I just felt like I needed to get home. And around this time, this would be when the economy was going to heck. Some of you guys may have heard of Enron creating all sorts of havoc, not only in the stock market, but also in the meteorological community. Why? Because Enron was really big in meteorological, I guess you could call it stock market and insurance and futures, right? So when they went down, a whole bunch of forecasters went with it. And it really hurt the industry. So I came home and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And this, again, is a great learning moment for a lot of you guys out there that are dealing with, I just had this amazing government job and now it's pulled out away from me. Then the federal government wasn't hiring. If you got a job in the federal government during this time around 2006, 2007, you were way ahead of the game because it was very difficult to do. So I went and did some basic jobs, worked at, let's see here, Macy's, just sold suits, and tried to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my career? And while that was happening, I started a blog called NYNJPA Weather. Now, the funny thing about this name, which one of my friends calls one of the worst and best names out there ever in business. Worst because it's hard to say sometimes. Best because it shows up on all the Google algorithms. And that's why I wrote it. I'm like, well, what do I want to call this blog? Okay. And I just kept on typing out combinations. And then there's one combination that stood out, which is now the company name. And Google was like, yeah, we love this name. We're going to share it on all the top engines and it's going to show up on top of all the links. And back then, that was like the biggest thing. It wasn't really so much social media. Facebook was a shell of itself. Twitter had like 4 people, and there was no Instagram really. You had MySpace, which was great if you wanted to share music with your favorite music or cause drama with your top 10 friends. Awesome thing to use, but not so much good for sharing businesses and weather. But that was the environment. And of course, you had YouTube, which was really just full of cat videos at that point. So I decided to start typing away at to share a basic forecast. And a couple people saw it. And back then, the big thing in the meteorological community were weather forums. Now, weather forums is a hotbed for arguing and drama, somewhat meteorology. And there were a couples I visited and I tried to respond to, and that's how you start to get the word out. Now today, weather forums are fading off into the background, but you can still find a couple of good ones every so often. I haven't been to one in a while, but that was the landscape back then. So again, just started typing out forecasts. I really wasn't thinking of it as a business, but more of I needed to psychologically be able to get for that outlet. During that time, I went through some depression, struggled with that quite a bit because I felt like my whole career was gone, that it was destroyed. And by starting out with the weather, with just that weather blog, at least I felt like I was contributing. So by 2008, I was starting to get a really good following and I felt good about it. And it was suggested, hey, I'd pay for a more detailed forecast, maybe focused for my small business. And a lot of these guys were landscapers, snow removal people, some people who were just interested in general weather. I'm like, okay, let's try it out. And so for the winter 2007 and into 2008, I started to organize a premium section, and the winter 2008, 2009, it went live. And that was the first time where I started to get subscribers to my website. And it's been growing ever since, steadily picking up schools. We started to add a business section specifically for more detailed business analysis, aside from just the general forecast and the technical forecast. And the technical forecasts were technical, like it went into mesoscale banding and slantwise convection and going over the science. And then the public forecast was more like, it's going to snow, here's how much. So you had here's what's going to happen, but then you got more of an education with the premium section. So that grew, and honest to God, there was no plan, none. I was just like, okay, sure. And while this was happening, I was working at a bank because I wanted to learn about finance, because if I was going to do this, I was going to have to learn about that type of stuff. So I started to work on learning the business by doing other jobs while building the website. So like I said, I went to the bank to learn about business loans, and I was a teller, but while I was doing that, I was preparing the loan guys about all the processes, what they look for, how do they determine what's a good loan, what's a bad loan, what's your best prospects. And by doing that, The smart thing was that then I was able to prepare myself for my business and also get an education without having to go to college for it. Then I went to another store called PC Richard and I had to learn how to do sales. Why? Because if I'm going to expand my business, I'm going to have to do sales, right? So I learned how to talk to people for sales. And I became the number one salesperson there in this store in Manalapan. In fact, some people would come in, they're like, hey, you forecast for me. Can you get me a good deal on this refrigerator? So it was great because I started to learn like how to talk to people. And again, a lot of people pay for this. I just went and did it and had the company pay me for doing it. And I got better and better at it. So I took those life skills and I took those skills and I continued to apply them to my business. And then I had another company that I work for even to this day that helps me gain knowledge in environmental science and how to deal with green cleaning and just a lot of green technology. And I use that to help me grow my understanding of what's important when I'm forecasting for a building management, right? Or something of that nature. So, what I'm trying to say is that if you're looking for your career to be linear and just like, well, I'm going to do A, B, C, life does not work like that. It never does. The most influential people in the world are people who have done multiple billions of things that they weren't even known for, but it all came together to make them who they are. So you have to be able to fall down and get back up. That is essentially my story. Falling down flat in my face, having nothing, and building up something from nothing. And being able to take the lumps, learn, have a bad forecast, take it in, just grow from it. Until now that we're at this point where I have a lot of different school districts, I have a growing business base, growing membership, which always spikes in the winter. I always expect that. If you do this in the Northeast, expect the winter to have a lot of money and the spring and summer, not so much. Probably in the plains, it'll probably be different because everyone's freaked out about tornadoes and all that stuff. So you got to understand that weather in many places is a seasonal thing. So with that being the case, I'm growing even more now as I earned this CDM, which was huge because while this was all happening, we didn't have a certification to separate the individuals who are just posting 360-hour GFSs and people who are actually putting out good work. So one of the people who I want to make sure I get their name right, I'm probably going to screw it up. With this CDM, there was a lot of people that really came in and really built the whole structure. There was Vanessa Alonso, who was our first president or board. Let's see here. Here it is. Erica Grow. I want to make sure I share her. Erica Grow, she recently worked for the government. She's an amazing leader. And she came to me first about this idea. And she's a big part of the American Meteorological Society. She does amazing work. She's an amazing person. And she came to a bunch of us who are out there in the social media field and saying, hey, would you be interested in helping us build a certified digital meteorology seal? And I was like, hell yeah, absolutely. It's something that we need. And so that was an amazing experience. And I've been serving on the board, and next year I will be the board chairman. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Currently, Joe Martucci is the chairman right now. He's doing an amazing job. And he's also doing a lot of amazing stuff with like drones and stuff. So he does an amazing job. You'll find that I tend to pump up everyone else around me. So there's a lot of great meteorologists in our field, in the social media field, that I just love to see do amazing jobs. And I'm looking up one now. Andrew Freeman does an amazing job. Although we don't always agree with some of the ways that he goes about phrasing some of the things, I have tremendous respect for him. And just so many meteorologists out there who are just doing an amazing thing. And for some reason, a lot of people think that I started all this. I just felt like it was an opportunity. Let's roll. So now I'm going for the CCM, and that's going to allow me to go to other types of fields, including lawyers, major energy companies, start to build that up. And I'm writing a book. And the book, this is going to be fun Because one thing I noticed when I got out of college is no one taught me how to forecast. They gave me all the science behind it, and I get it, and it was amazing, but there was no education on operational forecasting. You had synoptic meteorology, and you went through all that. But when I say operational forecasting, how do you craft a forecast for a client? How do you explain it to someone who doesn't understand it? You can explain it to your professor. You could spot out all the terms, all that stuff, make yourself sound really smart. But if you do that to like the general public, they're going to look at you like, what the hell are you talking about? So the book is going to be focused on how to do that and how to take all the information, all the models are out there, and how to consolidate it into an actual forecasting plan, and not so much getting bogged down with all the different models are out there. A lot of people focus on European versus GFS. It's not one model versus the other. You have to take pieces of it and combine it and look at how the atmosphere is evolving. Sometimes the GFS does a really great job at 500 millibars, not so much at 700 millibars, but the European does a better job at 700 millibars. So you combine them and you work it out and you make your forecast. The model doesn't make your forecast, you do. That's not taught. A lot of people say, well, this model's doing this and this model's doing that. And then you get model paralysis and then you can't do anything. And that's how you get well, here's the worst case scenario. Here's the best case scenario. I don't know what's going to happen. It isn't forecasting. That's just confusion. Looking forward to writing that book and getting that done. I would say we're about halfway done. I want to work out some tweaks. I want to make sure there's any other new research out there. I make sure I include it and reference it and all that good stuff. And then we're going to be growing even more and hopefully launching a new track for education where you could take classes, maybe like a forecasting certificate. We're looking to do that. So I'm really excited about that. And basically where I just teach the weather and something that's evergreens. A lot of things are on the way too. So it's really exciting.
Congratulations to all the stuff that is in the future for you, the book, the being the chair of the board of certified digital meteorologists. And there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. And we're going to be unpacking all of that throughout our conversation. But I want to, because I've been taking notes as you've been talking, I want to go back to the beginning where you had mentioned you had watched Jim Cantori and then you'd said Jim Hope as well. What are some moments from them that stand out to you today and have influenced you in your forecasting, your business, and how the way you communicate the weather?
The excitement of explaining what's happening and then explaining it in such a way that you protect human life and you get people. There are some people who are just going to be stupid. They're the type of people that we're going to have a party in front of a Category 5 hurricane. There's nothing you can do about that. But the ability just to share information and get it out there and explain it in such a way so that everyone understands it and take a technical matter and lower it down to a way that everyone can understand it. I think that's really important. And I was really just amazed with that. And John Hope, he did an amazing job with tropical systems and explaining the power of a hurricane and how it's evolving, how it's growing. And I would have loved to see him with today's technology, what he could have done, because back then the satellite pictures were just woefully horrible. And the thing about it back then too is that you had a kind of behind the scenes look of how everything was forecasted. And again, this was back in the 80s and 90s where you didn't even have AOL. Forget about it. You had no internet connection, right? So you're looking at this stuff and you're like, wow, there's actual models and there's actual data and you can see the satellite. My whole exposure to the satellite picture was me waiting for the Weather Channel to show it. So it was amazing. And then having people like that explain it was just amazing. And it was an experience that I just loved. Another person who did something who was amazing as well, I love watching, that's actually on my website now, is Tom Moore, who did an amazing job telling, and he brings a more of a historical reference to meteorology. And now I get to have him every Friday at 9 a.m. He shares posts about historical weather events. So I felt like it was an honor to have him. And he asked like, hey, do you mind if I post something on your website? I think it would be a great outlet. I'm like, absolutely. Are you kidding me? So We make sure that we have that. We share that every Friday morning. Just amazing meteorologist. And it was great to see like that behind the scenes.
I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you had mentioned earlier MySpace in the top 10 friends feature, and I want to take a moment and ask you, it'd be challenging, but I want to ask you, if you had to make a MySpace top 10 meteorologists or influential weather figures, who's going to be in your MySpace top 10 weather people?
Man, that's difficult. Oh, man. I don't know. I'd probably have like a lot of 1As, Bs, Cs, because it's hard to have like a top, like the top, right? Probably Paul Cosin, Dr. Paul Cosin, who wrote Northeast Winter Storms, Mussolini, who was co-authored on there. I got a good one for you that probably you guys probably might have to research. Lloyd Lindsay Young, from when I was a kid. He was on Channel 9 WOR, and he not so much like, oh, yeah, he was an amazing. He brought their like a real flair to forecasting. And I'll never forget, if you guys ever have a chance, Google or look on YouTube for Lloyd Lindsay Young. And he does this whole thing like hello, and he just names off people's like names and cities, and it was great because what was cool is that it taught me like, hey, you can have fun with this. So he was a very interesting guy. Of course, we talk about Jim Cantori, Tom Moore. They were amazing as well. I'd put them up there. Let me see. I'm going to get in trouble with some. I'm going to try and name some of the current guys out there that I have a lot of respect for. Let's see here. I want to make sure I get everyone's name too. Let's see. So there's, of course, Joe Martucci, a very great guy. Let's see here. Mike Rizzo, I think, is up and coming. I'm really impressed with what he does. He's out in New Jersey as well.
I love his moodcast. I don't mean to interrupt, but I love his moodcast and him using emojis to convey the weather forecast. I think that's really unique.
I think it's unique and it's important to have. I don't think I could pull that off because that's not my vibe, but I like his vibe. And I like Joe's vibe. And let's see here. I got a couple others. I want to pull off some people from that I checked out on TikTok because I think that this is really cool. That some of the people I found here. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Andrew Markowitz.
Andrew Markowitz, yeah, we actually had him on recently too.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with his work. He's doing a great job. I like what he's doing on TikTok. And I know that a lot of them are worried about this whole TikTok thing, but I said to him before, and I'll say it again. They come and go. Like you cannot base your identity on a social media platform because they'll come and go. I've seen them all come and go. Okay. As much as TikTok will go, something else will replace it. It's not the platform, it's you. So if you go somewhere else, they will follow, right? The following I have on X, well, guess what? It came from weather forums originally. It came from YouTube. So don't worry. Let the platforms be the platforms. They're a bunch of crazy multi-billionaires running around like the lunatics shooting themselves off into space. Don't worry about that. Just be you. If you're you and you're authentic, whether you're doing TikTok or whatnot, it will follow you, right? The top people that I just named off, they didn't become the top meteorologist, in my opinion, because of the platform they were on, but because of who they are, right? So I am really excited about our future. I really am. Even with this whole government thing, I think this is, in a way, this is the best thing that could have happened to a lot of these people because it's going to force you to look at doing forecasting a different way. And a lot of that is the private sector. And there's some freedom to that. Sometimes growing pains are hard, but at the same time, trust me, I've been through them. It makes you much better. It really does. And I'm really excited about what the future holds for these people. I really am.
To talk a little bit about your point on growing pains, disruption can bring a lot of change. I'm younging, but I took a class on how different technologies have disrupted communications and like TikTok, Twitter, now X, whatever you want to call it. There are so many platforms that have emerged. Vine, I'll mention that one too, because that has shaped what TikTok is now and Instagram shorts and whatnot. But as you said, growing pains, disruption can bring a whole bunch of new things. And on that note, what's one thing that you've seen so far that has disrupted the weather communications, the weather forecasting business that has grown the enterprise and moved in a direction that positively impacts the weather world and also society as well.
Well, I mean, we can go all the way back to TV, radio, and then the printing press. Every single one of them has altered the way that we have communication, right? On one hand, the great thing is that you can get a lot of information out. On the other hand, you also interact with some of these people who maybe don't get science all that much. As one person said, "Hey, how come you're controlling the weather?" And I explained to him, if I can control the weather, I would have had sunny skies and beautiful conditions for my wedding, okay? And the Mets would never have a rain delay, and the Yankees would constantly get hailstorms, and that would be it, okay? Now, I don't control the weather as much as I would like to sometimes, but it's interesting. It's also a great opportunity because of X, I've got to meet amazing meteorologists and we get to share ideas. Dr. Judah Cohen. I would have never been able to interact with someone who is so intelligent, so amazing, dealing with the polar vortex and all that stuff if it wasn't for social media, if it wasn't for X, okay, to be quite frank. Dr. Stephen Shepard, all right? He's an amazing meteorologist out of Georgia. We significantly disagree with each other on many things, aside from Kit Kats. We agree on that. But interacting with him, don't be afraid to interact with people who you disagree with. That's the most important thing. That's how you become better. You have to test yourself every day. That's how meteorology gets better. By running into someone that says, well, I don't believe in global warming. Great. Let's debate it. Let's look it out. Let's look at everything. And you know why? You want to know why it's important? Because there's a rare nugget sometimes, but they make a point. A very rare nugget. And that can make you better while you're educating everyone else. And when you're talking to everyone else, 9 out of 10 might be like, I don't believe you. I'm going to go to my forum and go to the crazy uncle association. But that one person, that makes a difference. And that's key. Education in our field is key. We are the most known scientists that most people will ever know. And you have to take that responsibility very carefully. You have to take it very seriously because, yes, there's going to be some people who just dismiss you, get upset with you because you interrupted their baseball game or basketball game or whatever. You're going to have those people. That's life. But for the person who is generally confused about something, you're their light. You're their guiding light. And part of that process is not about being right all the time, but admitting when you're wrong. That is what's key in all this. I consider it a huge opportunity when a forecast goes wrong, because then you could take a step back, publicly say, okay, this forecast didn't work. This is why it didn't work. This is what we learned from it. Why is that important? Because you're sharing the scientific process. You're sharing that, yeah, sometimes we're wrong. This is how we get better. And by sharing that, you bring everyone along with you in the learning process. And by doing that, you enhance your authority and your trust. So by enhancing your authority and trust, then you can start to talk about other topics like climate change. So you can explain to people, okay, yes, I agree with you. The world is not going to turn into Venus. I 100% agree with you on that. But this is some of the other things that we are doing. And here are some of the changes, and here's how we could track them. And then here's what we have gotten right. And yes, here are some things we've gotten wrong. And you, by taking that process, starting off with your own forecasting, and then looking at other topics like environmental science and saying, yeah, this is where they went wrong, and this is how we're improving. It's the same process that builds trust, which is something in our field and many other fields, unfortunately, has taken a big hit for a variety of reasons. And it's not just on one political side, it's both. So we have to be the ones who, we have the opportunity with social media to be that guiding light, to say, it's okay, we are going to be wrong. And that's okay. Now, but by being wrong, we can educate ourselves and educate everyone else and grow and become better. And I think it's an amazing opportunity.
And there's probably a lot of moments for you that you remember that were very memorable and sharing whether the forecast be wrong, or go back to your earlier point, debating with fellow meteorology professionals and weather professionals about different topics. But can you share one specific moment where it was the most rewarding for you and how that has shaped your practice today?
There are so many. I would say having a really deep conversation about climate change with Dr. Shepard, because I got to see the other point of view and it was very educational. Again, we disagree on some aspects, but we all agree that it's simple physics. If you add something into the atmosphere, you're going to have a response. So that was a lot of fun. That was great. And I really enjoyed it. I even bought his book that he wrote. I thought it was a great book. But I loved that. I loved interacting with Judah Cohen because I wanted to learn more about the stratosphere and having those bouncing questions off of him, understanding his process, and understanding when he had some issues with some of the forecasting he was putting out and how things changed and what he might have missed and didn't miss was a really important factor for me as well. I love that. And honestly, interacting with the general public. There's a lot of my followers who are weather enthusiasts, and having conversations with them was probably even the most rewarding part. And here's why: because it gave me an idea of what they're seeing and how they're taking in information and how I'm possibly explaining something that is up here because of what I'm used to talking about, and they're down here. Not in a negative way. I'm not trying to speak like that they can't understand it, but it's just like going in for your car, right? Your mechanic is talking about stuff up here in his level, and you're way down here saying, well, I just want to figure out how to turn on the radio, right? I don't know how to build a car. I don't know anything about that stuff. All I know is I turn it on and it goes, right? So as I got more and more used to interacting with the general public, it made me a better forecaster in terms of me being able to explain what is going on. And also giving them credit that, yeah, they may not know the technical terms, but they're smart. They'll figure it out if you explain it. And I think that's something that a lot of people in our field, especially when they talk about climate science, do a really poor job of, is that they always go to the worst case scenario, think that will catch their attention. The only thing you're doing is saying the worst case scenario, then it doesn't happen, and then you blow all trust, which is something you don't want, okay? And I think that our field really needs to learn that because they failed epically over the past 10 years on that, and we need to be better at that. Stop treating the general public and people who you may disagree with like they're idiots. They're not idiots. They just have a different point of view. So now you have to talk to them and educate them on what you know, and be humble and take in what they know, what they're experiencing, what they're seeing. If you don't do that, you go nowhere, and no one gets any education whatsoever, and no one grows as a result.
I think that's a very enlightened view, and one that can not only apply to the weather world, but also just general life. I mean, not to get too into it, but I feel like a lot of people can use a little bit of that and see others' perspectives, not just in the weather world, but in general life.
In many things, yes. It's something that I apply to all facets of my life, that I know what I feel, I know what I believe, but just because that's what I feel and what I believe, someone else might have another experience, and that's not anything good or bad. It's just something that you have to take into your life. And some people you're going to disagree with, and that's okay. That's what makes the world beautiful. It's okay to disagree with somebody, for God's sakes. If everyone agreed about everything, that's the making of a sci-fi horror movie, and no one wants that.
Yeah,
I am not interested in being a pod person. Thank you very much.
I'm sure there's a Star Trek episode. I'm trying to think, but there's probably a Star Trek episode that explores that a little bit more. Or to go off a little bit, The Orville, which is a parody in a way, or an homage to Star Trek. But
I'll give
that's
you even
getting
more of
that.
I'll give you even more classic one, Black and White, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Everyone's got to agree. It's the same thing. It's not good.
Good movies there. And we've still got a lot more to talk with you about your experience with the digital world, your business. We're going to take a quick break right here, but don't go anywhere. We still got more Everything Weather podcast with Steven DiMartino coming up in just a second. On this special 5-part edition of On This Day in Weather History, we revisit Hurricane Katrina, one of the most devastating hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. On August 19, 2005, a tropical wave merged with the remnants of Tropical Depression 10 near the Lesser Antilles. Over the next few days, the combined disturbance became more organizing into Tropical Depression 12 on August 23rd over the southeastern Bahamas. By the next morning, the tropical depression strengthened to Tropical Storm Katrina over the Bahamas. Katrina began to turn west towards Florida and quickly strengthened into a hurricane 2 hours before making landfall north of Miami on August 25th. While weaker than historic hurricanes that hit Florida, Katrina still brought flooding rains and heavy winds that downed trees and power lines across the southern half of the state. The tornado that tracked through Marathon on August 26th caused damage up to $5 million, including at the local airport. In total, Katrina caused more than $600 million in damages across Florida and claimed the lives of 14 people. Katrina emerged into the Gulf of Mexico on August 26th, moving over unseasonably warm waters. It quickly intensified as it slowly turned northward towards the Gulf Coast. Later that day, the National Hurricane Center shifted Katrina's forecasted track from the Florida Panhandle west towards the Mississippi-Alabama coast, placing New Orleans in the center of its forecasted path. Louisiana was no stranger to visits from hurricanes, though, with 57 hurricanes impacting the state from the mid-19th century to 2023, an average of one hurricane every 3 years. Early in the hurricane season, Hurricane Cindy had claimed the lives of 6 people and caused $320 million in damages due to heavy rain, coastal flooding, strong wind gusts, and some tornadoes across the southeast. Cindy also caused the most extensive power outage in New Orleans since Hurricane Betsy in 1965. But as forecasters and residents soon learned, Katrina would be unlike any hurricane they had ever experienced before. In the next part of this special On This Day in Weather History, we'll continue to track Katrina as it made its way north towards Louisiana and the preparations that were made by the area ahead of its fateful landfall on the Gulf Coast. Hello and welcome back to the Everything Weather Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle David, and today we've been talking with Steven DiMartino. He's a certified digital meteorologist and a prominent figure in the private meteorology industry, and he's started up his own business called NYNJPA Weather, where he focuses on bringing personalized weather forecasts for individuals, businesses, government entities for the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania states. We're going to get back into that conversation, but first, I've got another fun game for you, Steven. We've got weather brackets. I got to think of a better name than weather brackets, maybe a pun on words, but weather brackets is the name for it right now. So we've got 8 cities and their weather, what they normally see in terms of the weather, and your job is to, in playoff style, determine who goes on to the next round and eventually wins this weather bracket of best city weather. So with that said, are you ready, Steven?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
All right. So in our first matchup, we have the Titan number 1 seed New York City against the underdog 8 seed Kansas City. Who is going to win this matchup?
Well, this is going to be one of those games that's unfortunately a blowout early, but Kansas City will start off pretty strong because of their severe weather and their funky winter weather evolution, where you can get everything from snow to ice, over the rain, back over to snow. Now, New York City, though, well, that's where you can get your 30 to 40-inch blizzards out of nowhere and all sorts of meteorological mayhem based on the coastal front, whether it's in the winter or in the spring. So New York is going to win this one handily. Kansas City is going to put up a bit of a fight.
So New York City, of course, will triumph over Kansas City, but as you said, it was a good fight. Next up on the bracket, we have the number 2 seed, Philly. Shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles for the recent Super Bowl win against the 7th seed, Dallas. I'm not sure what is there for Dallas, but let's see how this matchup goes.
Well, Dallas starts off ahead at first because of their severe weather and their very impressive tornado potential, especially if you're just north and west of the city. But they're running into Philadelphia, which, despite their insane baseball mascot, who should be banned from the universe, has an amazing combination of tornadoes in the spring and summer because of the urban heat island effect. You have the winter storms, obviously, the ice potential to the northwest of you, especially in the Lehigh Valley. So Philadelphia pulls it out, but only barely because Dallas can have some pretty funky weather. And as one experience I had, when it does snow in Dallas, you're stuck at the airport because they believe when God gives us snow, well, God will take it away. So we'll just have to wait for it to melt.
And to go back to mascots, you also have Gritty as well, who is quite the character. I forgot the Phillies mascot, the green dude. Was it is it the Fanatic or
Fanatic. Yeah.
it's the Fanatic? Okay.
Evil creature and stole my popcorn.
Wait, is that true? The mascot. You were at
Yeah.
a game and stole the
I was out again. You stole my popcorn.
That'll
It
make a
will
fun.
revenge.
Maybe one of these days you'll get the Mets beating the Phillies in a key playoff game. But unfortunately, well, depending on your perspective, Philly goes on to the Final Four in this matchup against City Weather. Next up, we have the 3 seed Syracuse, known for its beautiful lake effect snow from time to time, and the 6 seed Miami for its very humid weather. What's this matchup going to look like?
Well, Miami starts to pull out ahead first because, well, if you want to get away from winter weather, you're going to go to Miami. Only problem is that by April, you die from the humidity and you can't breathe and you're constantly sweating. So, this is where Syracuse pulls ahead because their springs and summers are absolutely beautiful. And every so often, you get a pretty cool thunderstorm display coming right off of Lake Ontario. So, Syracuse pulls ahead in the last quarter, but only barely.
And we've got another case of a very close game or matchup. So Syracuse moves on, though, to the Final Four. And our next and final matchup before we get to the Final Four is 4 seed Oklahoma City against 5 seed Boston. This is a very interesting matchup here.
They're two very dynamic and different entities where you have a lot of interesting weather. Oklahoma, of course, is known for their severe weather. Boston, well, see, Boston, you would think that the summer would be nice, but you get an onshore flow from the Gulf of Maine and it messes up your whole day and you're cloudy and 50. Then it becomes 70 again and you go to a baseball game and then they lose to the Yankees and everyone gets upset and everyone gets drunk and then it rains. So Boston is very much a very weird city. While the other one, it's not so bad. So I'm going to go with Boston losing.
Would that be also due to, as a Mets fan, your dislike for any Boston teams, or is it just purely based off of weather here?
I'm not so I don't dislike any Boston teams. I kind of pity them in a way. So I can't really say it's dislike. Now, I appreciate the 86 World Series, even though I was too young. But the Yankee fans seem to have a bigger problem with Boston. For what I don't know, because they stole their best player. And then for a horrible play, by the way. And then they constantly beat the heck out of them. So I don't even know why Yankee fans hate Boston Red Sox. They constantly slap them all over the place. So, yeah.
It sounds more like, to draw a connection to the college football world, the quote unquote rivalry between Rutgers and Penn State. Penn State people will be like, what's with this rivalry? Yet Rutgers people will be like, yeah, we don't like Penn State. I don't get it as a Rutgers person. But anyways, no upsets with the weather brackets here. So we've got the 4 seed Oklahoma City moving on to the Final Four matchup. And that brings us to our Final Four matchup. We've got, on the first half, the 1 seed New York City against the 2 seed Philadelphia. So we've got the battle of the I-95.
That's a tough one. But I'm going to have to definitely go for New York City for several reasons. First of all, they have far more impressive winter storms, okay? Second, they get really cool severe weather coming off of northwestern New Jersey. And also more of an impact from the sea breeze front and backdoor cold fronts. But most importantly, they don't have an evil mascot that destroys children's popcorn while they're watching baseball games. So as a result, Philadelphia has to be eliminated. Sorry, Philly.
And New York City goes on to the final matchup against the winner of this second half Final Four, the 3 seed Syracuse against the 4 seed Oklahoma City. Who's taking the second half?
I'm going to say Oklahoma City on this one, mostly because the dynamic weather you can get spring, summer, winter, and fall cannot be beat compared to Syracuse. Can be amazing, but they really focus more on the winter, of course, lake effect snow, which can be hit and miss. Sometimes it remains just to the north of you, sometimes just to the south of you, and then other times it just never ends. Whereas Oklahoma, you always blink and you'll get a different type of weather. So it's always a challenge. So I would go with Oklahoma City.
Wow, in the final four matchup, we have an upset. So number 4 seed moves on to our weather bracket championship here for best weather for any of these cities. So that leaves the number 1 matchup, New York City, the titan of this weather bracket, against the number 4 seed, the seemingly underdog, Oklahoma City. So, Steven, who takes home the championship for this weather bracket?
New York City takes us on without even a fight. And the simple reason is this: when it's July, it's 100 degrees as a cool day in Oklahoma City, and your tires can melt. And I have personal experience of this in my 20s working out in Oklahoma City, where someone told me, hey, it's going to be cool today. It's only going to be 101. I don't think so. So as a result, Oklahoma City gets blown out because New York City has this amazing thing called the Atlantic Ocean, where at the very least, when it's 95 degrees out, you can go to the beach, get a nice sea breeze, and cool off a bit without having to die or your car literally melting.
Wow, blowout. That's a very interesting way to describe this matchup. But the winner, as you said, is New York City. I feel like I'm not surprised by this because I feel like New York wins a lot of different things, but that's non-weather related things, of course.
But I mean, really, if you think about it, New York City is one of the few cities in the world that gets impacted by at least 7 different air masses and several different types of storms. Everything from hurricanes, tornadoes, to winter storms, lake effect snow, ocean effect snow, backdoor cold fronts. You get everything.
And the occasional severe thunderstorm, maybe a tornado here and there, but
That's rare, but it's happening more and more, especially along the I-5 corridor.
especially in New Jersey. I feel like that's become its own little mini hotbed for tornado activity. And I'm sure you know this as well, forecasting for the area.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some theories on that I'm applying to my forecasting that is actually helping out quite a bit.
Okay, and you know what? To get back into the conversation, I'm curious to learn about some of your theories on severe weather in New Jersey, the New York, PA, tri-state area, and tornado activity. So, with that said, let's get back into the conversation with that. What are some theories that you have with that?
Well, I don't think you can use the old rules in terms of expectation for severe weather around the northern mid Atlantic and especially around the Delaware River Valley, I-5 corridor, same type of region. And the reason why is because of how we built up around the region. We've gone from farms, just living here since I moved here as a kid in the mid 1980s. And when we did move here, our biggest concern was the fact that a bull got out and it was running around the neighborhood. Okay. It was corn everywhere. There were farms everywhere. Now there are malls everywhere. There are roads everywhere. There are houses everywhere. Why is this important? Well, this increases urban heat island effect. So you're enhancing the heat at the boundary layer on the I-5 corridor with a natural dip in Monmouth County. So you kind of get this pool of cool air and then this warmer air next to it, and you enhance low level vertical rotation. And so what we're seeing here is thunderstorms that normally are coming in that can be strong, even severe, but now you're interacting with a different microscale and mesoscale boundaries. And those boundaries typically are just to the north and west of the city. It's not within the actual heat island, it's on the edge. So you're enhancing frontogenesis, mesoscale frontogenesis, and you're enhancing rising air. And so that rising column is leading to the potential for thunderstorms that can enhance that turning motion in the atmosphere and produce tornadoes. Now, for the most part, you're talking about F0s, F1s, but you're seeing a noted increase because of those factors. And I think we're going to see that more and more as we continue to grow. Like I said, and just in Freehold alone, if you lived in Freehold, New Jersey for a long time, it went from everything is fields and corn to now everything is houses and malls and concrete and asphalt with parking lots. It's going to have an influence.
And so you get a little more of the urban heat island effect, as you said, for some areas in New Jersey.
Right. And that temperature gradient leads to these mesoscale and microscale boundaries, which leads to enhancement and weakening of thunderstorms.
Interesting. And I wonder if that would extend possibly the severe weather season a little bit, because you also have the Atlantic, and that can be very warm towards the end of local summer as you're getting into September, October, and the land gets cold or it's warmer. Maybe there's some differences there that will either shorten it or weaken or lengthen, severe weather here. What do you think about that?
Well, it depends on the region. I think if you're on the immediate coast and basically to the southeast of I-95, really the ocean effect just deadens everything pretty quickly. But if you're right on the I-95 corridor, we've seen impressive thunderstorms as early as February and as late as November. And then also, it's going to be interesting to see what that impacts are going to be when it comes to major winter storms. And we start to study mesoscale banding within these winter storms, because this is how you get your heaviest snowfalls through convective banding, and how those urban heat island effect boundaries that aren't just in your traditional city, but now along these major highways will start to influence the evolution of our precipitation shield and convective slantwise convection within those winter storms.
That's interesting. Okay. And we're going to touch a little bit upon like what you see as trends for changing weather for the New Jersey, New York, PA area. But as somebody who's had a lot of forecasting experience dating back to the middle school and high school era, I'm curious, what has been your most exciting weather event to forecast for? And then what was your most frustrating weather forecast or weather event that you've had to forecast for?
Let's see here. I would say exciting, terrifying, and rewarding Hurricane Sandy, because I got so many letters of people thanking me for getting them out of the way, which I think is far more rewarding than any amount of money. Most frustrating every time a winter storm is approaching, because there's always some idiot posting a GFS or NAM model snow map and not knowing what in the hell they're talking about, and showing 30 inches of snow and then getting all these phone calls and whatnot from clients getting terrified. And of course, then there's our weather apps that actually don't have any type of meteorologist working on them, that just spits out whatever the model guide says. So 1 hour it produces 35 inches, next hour it produces 2 inches, and then 30 inches and 40. It's all over the place. So that's when it gets frustrating, because you get tired of saying, this is my forecast. I don't know what everyone else is doing, but this is mine. And probably the most frustrating question is, well, why is X, Y, and Z doing this? And I always say, I don't work for them, whether that's the government or another company. I just do what I do. And I don't feel comfortable in critiquing other people's forecasts, because maybe they have a good idea. I don't know, but I'm not there to see or ask questions about their process. So it's not fair for me or them for me to critique that. So this is what I'm thinking. Go with it if you want.
I feel like this would be a great moment to segue to the Certified Digital Meteorologist seal and how you stand out as a leading figure for weather information. Before I ask this question, I'll give a little context for those who don't know what I'm talking about. The American Meteorological Society, basically the largest weather collection of weather people in the country, in the United States, has a seal that meteorologists can get called the Certified Digital Meteorologist seal. It's a brand new seal that came out a couple years ago and helps people identify who is trustworthy in the weather world and who knows their stuff. And you are one of the first people who have gotten that Certified Digital Meteorologist seal. So as somebody who has gone through the process, can you talk about it a little more and how that helps people when they're looking for weather information during, say, a Hurricane Sandy or a winter weather event, distinguish you from other weather information that is out there as credible and trustworthy?
Right. Well, First of all, in order to earn the seal, you have to take a test. It's about 90 minutes long. It is multiple choice and it can be very difficult. So you test your meteorological knowledge. You have to have a degree or something that's equivalent to that, let's say military service. And then you have to provide examples of the work you do. Individuals that, let's say, share 300 GFS models, snow maps, would not be able to get this type of certification because, in the process of looking over your work and what you're providing, that would probably get red flagged, right? So it's individuals that are very careful in describing what's going on. They are responsible with what they're sharing and they're responsive and they have a good rapport with the general public. So when you provide all your information, you get basically rated, graded, and then if you pass, then you get your seal. And what that seal stands for is that this is a person that, we're not saying that they're always going to be right, because no one could say it. That's not the point of the seal, but that they can be trusted and that they're responsible with the information that they're giving. It's meant to highlight people that are providing information that the general public can trust, not someone who's just looking for the most hits and the most following and all that stuff.
And on that note, to talk a little bit about weather information that is out there, those model hour 300, 400 outputs, those screenshots that you see of snowfall for, let's say, the I-95 corridor. I've talked about it with Matt Lanza, who's talked about it with the Houston area and tropical forecasting. I've talked about it with Andrew Markowitz in the TikTok space. You, on the other hand, you have private meteorology experience. You forecast for a wide array of clients, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. And you also forecast for the public as well. You're out there doing live streams, doing public forecasts, and you also have paid forecasts as well if people want more in-depth forecast information for New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So I'm curious on your perspective. How do you combat or how do you encounter misinformation and disinformation? How do you work to combat that?
Well, part of it is just being honest and just saying, this is what I'm seeing. This is why I'm not putting out a snow map, because there's too much volatility and there's too much uncertainty. The one thing that I think has been the worst thing in our industry is this snow map, the model snow map. Let me be very specific, that a lot of private weather companies put out, like for their model data, right? The model snow map is a crutch. It is a sign of weakness, and I refuse to use it. I never use it. And the reason why is because it is seriously flawed. It is based on the idea of QPF times the temperature, 850 millibars, which usually they consider whether it's above freezing or below freezing, and then multiply that by 10. It is not even close to the real atmospheric environment, because the atmospheric environment is such that sometimes you might be minus 6 degrees Celsius at 850. Sometimes you'll be at 0 degrees Celsius. Sometimes your boundary layer is actually warmer because of different factors. So you get people who want to get a lot of traffic and whatnot sharing these maps, and it creates a lot of confusion. So the best thing you could do is share your information and explain, especially for your consulting, your premium members, what you think is actually going to happen and also what you're not sure about. Explain what the volatility is, what's the chaotic factor, and how best to prepare for it. By doing that is how you actually educate the public. Saying, okay, this is what I think is going to happen, and here's why. If you ever watch me doing a video, especially what I call a premium public video, where I go into a little bit more of the details behind the model guidance, I explain not only when and how the storm's going to impact you, but why and what are the variables and how to prepare for them, where it's the most likely areas for the heaviest snowfall. Now, there's going to be some people that they won't listen, that they will go with the worst case scenario. And then after that worst case scenario busts and doesn't happen, and you keep on telling them it's not going to happen, they'll still blame you for it not happening. There's nothing you could do about those people. And sometimes you just got to shrug and say, okay, whatever. But most people will appreciate the hard work you put in and your ability to explain what is happening with a storm and what is the best and worst case scenarios within that storm.
And for those that tune into your either your live streams that you have on social media or your premium chats that you have, I'll take this moment to say they may see some pop culture things in the background of where you're doing your live stream. And I'm going to take this moment to pose an interesting question for you. And it'll tie back to the weather and how you forecast using different pop culture things that you're familiar with, like Godzilla or Star Trek or whatever. Can you talk about how you forecast for winter weather rather than using just those snowfall maps?
Well, what I love to do is get back to the science, to pure science, and I break down the various levels in the atmosphere. And I like to look at 850 millibars and 925 millibars, and look at those temperature regimes. Look at the SKU-T to see where the best snow growth is, and then combine that with the QPF map, which is just a precipitation map, which is fine, right? Then you compare that to the lifting parameters. One of the things that I always say to myself when I'm forecasting is that, does the model make sense? Does it make physical sense? Does it make sense that there's two upper level lows within 10 miles of each other? Probably not. Does it make sense that there is this bullseye of strong lifting? No, that's probably convective feedback error. So my process is not just creating the forecast, but also looking for the pitfalls. What are some of the model errors that I am not seeing? And how can I adjust according to that? And sometimes I'm very successful. I compare myself to a baseball player. Sometimes I'm batting 500 and I'm doing amazing and I'm ready to go to the Hall of Fame. And then there's other weeks, months even, where I'm batting 200 and I'm just out of sync and there's something missing in my process. I have to step back and get better. And the cool thing about being older now, I'm 45, is that when I was younger, it took me longer to break out of that slump. And now it's more like a day where I get a slump. I get a day forecast wrong rather than a week's forecast wrong because I understand my process better. And to be fair, some of my ego is out of it too. When you're in your 20s, you always want to be right. You always want to be the best. And then meteorology, much like baseball, is incredibly humbling. And you'll learn that you'll never be the best. You'll never be right all the time. And so you have to learn how to explain a forecast properly and expect that sometimes you're going to be wrong about a couple of details and improve your forecast based on that. So that's my process.
I love how instead of connecting pop culture, you connected baseball to your forecasting and your batting average and your forecast average. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of pop culture too, baseball and whatnot. Los Angeles Dodgers cheating and always using gambling, stuff like that. I mean, I will say this, but if I may add about baseball, I find it ironic that baseball keeps out Pete Rose for gambling and then has gambling literally on their games with with their best baseball player, supposedly. I don't think so. But the false MVP, which should have been gone to someone in New York named someone else, a shortstop, but who is connected to gambling, which I find very interesting. So that's trusting AI as your constant forecasting and then get surprised that AI fails. I don't know. Silly. A lot of silliness.
A couple ways I want to go with that. Side note, though, not to go off the beaten path or the weather beaten path. What do you think about the torpedo bats that the Yankees are using? Is that, do you think that's cheating or just a
No,
side
I mean, I think it's smart physics, to be honest with you. It makes sense. But see, as long as all the other teams can use it, but I will say one thing with the torpedo bats, think about the torque involved in that, right? So you're putting a lot of mass towards the center and end of the bat when you're swinging it. And so you have a displacement in your mass. You're going to tweak your elbow and your bicep a lot more because you're putting a lot more torque involved. So you might get a lot more base hits potentially, and they may go farther, but you also might get injured faster, more frequently. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I think they're smart to design a bat like that, and it doesn't break any rules. That's very Jesus words. I think that's very smart that they built that bat. But some people have hot takes on whether they should be using it or not, or like you said earlier with Pete Rose and his stint with gambling, whether or not that he should be Hall of Fame or not. But to bring it back to the weather, is there a weather hot take that you have or hot takes that you have?
Let's see. Oh, I got so many. One of my themes I'm actually trademarking is meteorology, not modelology. I hate it when I see people posting like 6, 7 models saying, well, this is what the models say. I don't give a damn what the models say. What's your forecast? You didn't graduate meteorology. You didn't get your meteorological degree to compare models. You did it to understand the atmosphere. So I think the models have been too much of a crutch. I think there's too much model paralysis out there where everyone's looking. I mean, for God's sakes, they're pulling up the Korean model, the Brazilian model. I don't know what's next. Norwegian. I don't know. The Russian. That one's a little drunk. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. What is your process? Why do you think something's happening? Not what model is the most. I just think that we are too hamstrung on models, and so naturally, everyone's all ooh and ah about AI, which is nothing more than statistical analysis, which is perfect when it comes to chaos. Yeah, I mean, because what's going to be better than figuring out chaos than forget the physics? Let's just do statistics. Oh, that's real smart because the atmosphere is steady state, right? So I'm looking at this AI stuff and I'm like, bring it on. I'm going to beat you bloody because you can't adjust to changing dynamics. So yeah, you have a model that's learning, but what is it really learning? Because you don't involve any of the physics. It's just all statistical analysis. Well, how do you do that in an environment where you have a changing climate? That doesn't track. That doesn't make any sense. So I am looking forward to AI making a fool of itself and I'm making money off of it. So how about that? How about that for a hot take? And the other thing too, weather apps. Holy, weather apps are a joke, okay? Of course, sometimes you get what you pay for with some of this stuff, but if I have one more person say, oh, well, my weather app says I might throw them through a window, I mean, it's ridiculous. Weather apps are because all of it is straight GFS, and we all know what straight GFS gives you. So those are some of my takes.
And to go back to the AI weather take, I agree with you on that because for another reason too, the meteorologist has instinct, it has intuition. AI computers don't have that intuition, that experience, that seasoned experience forecasting weather. And you're very seasoned with forecasting, and you have that seasoned experience that an AI model does not have.
And it's just a model. Whatever data you put into it, that's all you get out of it. So you have to be able to recognize when you have bad data. Like, what does it do when it has 999 for a data input? And it's going to, unfortunately, with some of the cuts that we've been hearing about, that might happen more frequently than you like.
Yeah, and to tie back to that, the cuts and stuff, we've actually had you on for our deep dive episode on the what's going on with the NOAA National Weather Service cuts, what's going on, and why they're important, not just for us in the weather world, but for everybody, the listeners who are listening, from the farmer to the everyday mom trying to navigate the chaos of the weather. And it seems like that the impacts are just continuing to grow and grow. So this is a rare opportunity for a returning guest to talk about something a little bit more. On that note, is there anything you'd like to add that has been changing that you see going on with this that concerns you?
Well, concerned, but also hopeful. Just this past weekend, before the weekend before this recording, there was a reduction in some of the websites. And it was noted that, hey, some of this stuff we actually really need, especially when it impacts business, at drought.gov, stuff like that. Someone was listening because it got turned back on literally, what, like 4 hours later? It was turned back on. The websites came back. So I understand what they're trying to do with these cuts, not just with NOAA, but all over government. I get it. But the positive is that someone, I don't know who, someone's listening and saying, okay, maybe we need to scale back. Maybe we need to hire back some. I've heard that they've hired back some people saying, maybe the staff, maybe we need to fix this. So I feel better about the fact that somebody is responding. You might not get everything you want, but there's at least some response like, all right, we've cut a little bit too much. Maybe we need to adjust. Some of this stuff I think that I guess you could say, overreacted a bit when they were talking about shutting down a building. They're not shutting down the computers. They had to shut down. They might be looking to move out of a building, might be looking to consolidate buildings. That doesn't impact forecasters, okay? As much as someone wants to freak out about it. If you have an office where you have a couple computers and a lot of staff that barely comes to the office, then I understand it. And you want to consolidate that office into one thing. That's the world. That's not anything that's like specifically about government. That's just the world in general. So I take a more non-emotional approach to this and trying to say, okay, what is the environment that we're dealing with? What are the impacts? And then when there are impacts, what is the response? And the response has been, well, let's correct it. So we're starting to see that more and more. I think that we're moving in a positive, but I always say I can't blame them if they want to cut the GFS. Just burn it. I don't blame them. But maybe they'll fix that too. I don't know. Or just pay the Europeans and have them put that in the GFS.
Now, there's a weather hot take there.
There's a weather hot. Everyone knows my hate for the GFS. And let me tell you something. The GFS has a long history, and it is something called the MERF. Now, the MERF, it is the same genetics. And the MERF is known for creating hurricanes every day 6 somewhere off the East Coast, regardless of the time of year. So this is the genetics that this thing is carrying. The Murphicane. Anyone who is Gen X or younger knows about the Murphicane, which is basically a hurricane on the MRF, which was the precursor to the GFS, every day 6 and 7. And the GFS simply pushed that back to day 10 through 15 with ridiculous solutions, whether it be epic blizzards or hurricanes or what have you. So for all the money we spend for it, can't we just fix it, please? Because it's embarrassing.
The Murphicane. I've not heard. I don't know much about the Murph, but I've never heard of the Murphicane.
Anyone who's in their 40s or older will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Interesting. And for those listening that may not be a weather professional or very in tune with how weather forecasting is done, could you talk about why that occurs and why meteorologists don't look further past than day 7 or 10 for models?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why. First, you have to look at models like your TV, right? You have your latest and greatest, which is great resolution, right? Great picture, amazing visualization, color, all that stuff. That's like the European now, or even if you want to go with the GFS today, okay? As you go further out in time, that resolution, let's say that you're stepping further away. Instead of watching the TV in your living room, now you're in the kitchen and you don't see as well of the TV of what's going on there. So you don't see all the details. So it's a little bit fuzzy. So some of the descriptions that you're seeing may not be very accurate. And then you keep on stepping back further to now you're in the garage and you just barely see the TV. And you get a very basic idea that there's a baseball game or a football game on, but you're not really sure who's winning or losing, where they are on the field, but you get a general idea that there's a game going on. That is the forecast for days 3, 7, 10, 15. By day 15, you get a kind of idea that something's going on. There's an active weather pattern, but you don't really know what the details are. Now, add that to now you have an annoying kid jumping up and down. Okay, that's your convective feedback error. And so the kid keeps on throwing a balloon, their favorite toy, they're screaming, and now you can't make out what is going on. Again, you get an idea that there's a baseball game or a football game on, but you have no idea what's going on because there's all this disruption. That's convective feedback error. So what that leads to in terms of model guidance is that instead of, let's just say, a general winter storm producing 6 to 12 inches, well, that convective feedback now produces a 12 to 24 inch blizzard with 30-inch blotches everywhere. And that's where that idiot takes the snow map and posts it all over social media for a storm that's 10 days out. When, as a meteorologist, I see bullseyes everywhere. So that tells me convective feedback error. Yeah, there's a good chance for a storm to develop, but this is likely BS. So remove it and just go with the idea there's a potential here for some moderate to heavy snowfall that we'll have to keep an eye on. That's your model guidance. And what you have to do when you use the model guidance is understand of its limitations, the resolution involved, and also what model you use. So, there are some people, for whatever reason, use the CFS model for synoptic forecasting. Okay, now let me explain what this means, okay? The CFS model is a global model or climate model, should I say. So it's great for picking up the general 500 millibar pattern. If you're going to start to see changes in El Nino or La Nina, the MJO, large scale tropical forcing, high latitude blocking, stuff like that. It's your sledgehammer. Now, if you're using synoptic forecasting, you're trying to use a sledgehammer to put up a nail for your picture, right? Not good, not very effective, and you end up with a hole in the wall. Other people like to use the NAM or the HRR, which are mesoscale models, small scale, for a synoptic scale question, like whether or not a winter storm is going to produce heavy snowfall. The problem with that is that, again, resolution. Mesoscale models are good for picking up, let's say, convective elements within a winter storm, but not the winter storm overall. So what that means is that now you're using a little tiny hammer to nail in a nail in the wall, and it's going to take you forever to actually get the real solution because the hammer is too small. So you have to use the right tool for the right time, for the right question, with the right resolution. And if you don't understand those things, all you're doing is wasting everyone's time.
I will say real quick, those are phenomenal analogies. I think probably the best that we've had so far, comparing model guidance and time to the quality of TVs, whether you're in the living room or the kitchen or the garage, and then the analogy of the different types of models and what hammer you're using to use to nail in a nail for a frame. I love those analogies.
Thank you.
And I'm curious because I want to segue now into, you had mentioned earlier, you're writing your book on weather. Is that analogy going to make it into the book? Are there any other analogies that you've picked up along the way that are going to make it into that book?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of little cues and little sayings that I have that are definitely going to be in the book. A lot of, I guess you can call guidelines on how to forecast properly, how to use the correct models and why. So there's going to be a lot of fun in that. And working on the illustrations, we'll have fun with that too. So this book is taking a little longer, but I wanted to take longer because I wanted it to be just right. And the goal is for it to be my lasting final stamp on meteorology. And I think that'd be pretty cool to have that opportunity to add that. And God, hopefully, maybe if it's good enough, maybe it might be on the same bookcase with a Costa and Mussolini book in terms of forecasting. I don't know. That's the goal. We'll see how it goes.
And on that note, I got an interesting question for you in that you've got a lot of books behind you on your bookshelf, and you've mentioned a couple of authors of meteorology books. What's one thing you've picked up from any of those books that sticks with you to this day so much that you may include it or have included already in your book that you're already writing?
Oh man, I love Costa and Mussolini's book. I really do because it allowed me to see the connection between large scale forcing and how it impacts the forecast I'm creating for my region, and how at a young age I learned that what happens in the Pacific or in Japan has a significant impact to what I'm expecting for my region. So it ties everything together, and it's just something I use daily. When I got this back when I was in college, early years in college, it really opened my eyes and it really helped me become a better meteorologist.
And for our listeners who want to go and check out that book, what's the name of that book? And I'll include it in the show notes.
Sure, it's East Coast Winter Storms by Costa and Mussolini. You could also find it on the AMS website. It's part of their selection.
And for our listeners, we'll include both the Amazon link and the AMS link for you to go and buy the book. Would recommend you doing the AMS link because it supports the American Meteorological Society.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think that there's a discount if you're a student member. So something to just look up.
Everybody loves discounts, so if you're a member of the American Meteorological Society, take advantage of the discount. And with that said, that we're getting towards the end of our podcast interview, and I've got one final segment before our last fun section, and I'm calling it the sunset segment as we look at the sunset on our conversation. It allows you to be open ended with it, take it a number of different directions. So, with that said, do you have any final pieces of advice that you'd like to leave for meteorologists or growing meteorologists? Is there any myths you'd like to bust, or any last parting thoughts that you'd like to leave for our listeners?
Sure. Especially with what's been going on over the past couple of months. Do not let other people or events take control of your future. Life isn't going to be fair. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose everything. Don't let it stop you. Take it from someone who has gone through depression, who has lost everything, and has built everything up on their own. Help from other people and other suggestions and growing and failing and climbing back up and getting knocked down. Life is a lot more like a Rocky movie than you think. You are going to get knocked down. That's okay. The important thing is that you get back up. You will lose your job. It's okay. The important thing is that you get back up, that you become stronger from it. It's okay to take a day and even a couple of days and cry and feel bad and eat 4 gallons of ice cream, whatever. But get back up. Don't let other people's circumstances control you. I didn't, and you don't have to either. So when the going gets tough, it's not just about getting tougher, it's just getting back up. And I think that there are so many young meteorologists out there that have so much to share. And believe me, you have so much more opportunity than I ever did. When I got out of college, I didn't have a website to build. I mean, I had GeoCities. Trust me, it was garbage. You have so much opportunity. You may not see it right now, but it's there. Grab onto it and build your own way. I guess that's what I have to say.
Did the Rocky music play in the background? I feel like that was a motivational speech or like the makings of a motivational video there.
All I could say is that I'm really excited about the future on so many levels, and it's out there in front of you, even when you don't think it is. Believe me, it is.
To kind of connect a Disney movie called Up, Adventures Out There. So
It's
there's
true.
adventure out there in the weather world, and adventure with you, with all that you're doing with the book that you're writing, New York, New Jersey, PA weather, and you eventually becoming the chair of the board of certified digital meteorologists. There's a lot cooking up for you, and I hope we can have you on again in the future to talk about more about all the things that you've been working on. But before we get to the final section, do you have any last things you'd like to say?
No, I think we pretty much covered all of it. Hopefully, we get some winter storms this upcoming winter. That'd be nice. Get some of those snowplow guys that are a little bit like, hey, we need more snow. I'm like, trust me, you'll get it. And then you'll complain that you get too much snow, but we'll get there.
It's almost like Murphy's Law, like you're asking for the snow and then you get it. But then, like, if you're not prepared or if you are prepared for the snow, it's not going to come for you.
I got a very simple, basic saying. There is no such thing as average, this the illusion of average. Our weather is never average. It's actually rare to be normal.
Okay, I like that. I like that. We're adding a bunch of little nuggets of interesting information, interesting sayings. That's going to make the wall for interesting sayings on our podcast. But with that said, we're watching the sunset on our podcast and our conversation, but it's not the end of the podcast just yet. We've got one more fun game for you before we hit the road, and that is our whether or not trivia. So we've got some weather themed, non-weather themed trivia questions based on what you're interested in, Steven, and we'll see how you do with them. With that said, are you ready to wrap this all up?
All right, let's do it.
All right. This is whether or not your first question is related to Kansas City Chiefs Christmas games. The Kansas City Chiefs have played 5 all-time games. Let me redo that. The Kansas City Chiefs have played 5 games all time in their franchise history on Christmas, winning 3 of them and losing 2. One of those losses was in 2024, and the other was during a 1971 playoff game against which team? Was it A, the Miami Dolphins, B, the Baltimore Colts, C, the New York Giants, or D, the Tennessee Titans?
I'll go with the Colts. Baltimore Colts. Yeah, the Colts.
Your final guess is the Colts? I'm sorry to say you are incorrect. It was the Miami Dolphins that they lost to in the
Really?
1971 game. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
I believe
makes
it was a
sense.
very close matchup too, but don't quote me on that one.
I just thought I was like thinking of like 1970s. Well, it was either Miami or it was going to be the Colts. And I'm thinking maybe the Colts because they no longer exist in Baltimore. But
Yeah, did they move to I don't even think they were the Indianapolis Colts when they moved. They became the Browns, I believe, if I'm
mm,
not mistaken.
yeah, it's bouncing all over the place. NFL does crazy stuff with their teams.
I feel like that could be a whole podcast in itself of the craziness of the NFL. But unfortunately, it was the Miami Dolphins who beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the 1971 AFC playoff game.
Now I'm on one. Great.
Hey, you know what? It's all about having fun. So if
That
you're
is.
having
And
fun,
learning something new.
there you go. Finding the silver lining to everything. But this one, I think, is more up your alley in terms of weather. This is whether or not your next question is related to Superstorm Sandy. On October 23rd, 2012, the path of Sandy was correctly predicted nearly 8 days in advance of its signature left turn into the East Coast by which model? Was it A, the European model, B, the GFS or the American model, C, the GEM model or the Canadian model, or D, the GMA model or the Japanese model?
The European model definitely had, I think, about that time period.
So your final guess is the European model? You are correct. It was the European model, and it was the only model to predict that left turn before all the other models started to show that left turn into New Jersey and the East Coast. So
I remember that vividly. Why the European did so well is because it handled the 500 millibar block the best.
yeah. And as you said earlier, it's got better capabilities in terms of forecasting and stuff. I feel like that in itself, talking about the European model, could be its own podcast episode in the future.
Definitely.
So, all right, let's hopefully keep the streak going. This is whether or not the next question is related to Dragon Ball Z. In the popular anime, who is the prince of all Saiyans? Is it A, Broly, B, Raditz, C, Vegeta, or D, Nappa?
Well, it's Vegeta, but mostly in his own mind. But yeah, it's Vegeta. He's the prince of all Saiyans. All
Your
two of them.
final guess is Vegeta. You are correct. It is Vegeta is the prince of all Saiyans, and so you say it's in his head more than anything.
Well, how can one be a prince or a king when his whole kingdom got blown up by Frieza?
Okay. I don't know Dragon Ball Z that well. I know like some of the characters like Goku, Vegeta, but that's interesting lore then. Now I'm gonna have to go and check that out. So
There you go.
now I'm learning something with this as well. So we're having some fun here. Anyways, this is whether or not your next question is related to Northeast winter storms. What does the 4070 benchmark represent in winter storm forecasting in the Northeast? Is it A, the average amount of snow during winter storms in the Northeast, B, a geographic location that helps predict heavy snowfall for the Northeast, C, the coldest temperature ever recorded during winter storm in the Northeast, or D, a specific wind pattern observed during winter storms along the coast?
Geographical B.
Final guess? You are correct. It is a geographic location that helps predict heavy snowfall for the Northeast. And with that, that brings us to our final question. This is whether or not, last question is related to the New York Mets.
There you go.
Which former Mets player gained the nicknames of God of the Shortstop and Godzilla? Is it A, Hideo Nomo, B, Masato Yoshi, C, Nori Aoki, or D, Kazuo Matsui? I
Well,
hope I
if he
said those
played for
names
the
right.
Mets as a shortstop, it was Matsui.
Final guess is Matsui. You are correct. It is Kazuo Matsui. And the trick was these are all Japanese Mets players. So that may have thrown you off, but you did not get thrown off by that. And you held true and you held a good streak there at the
The
end.
Mets had two Japanese players that are very well known, Matsui and Shinjo. Shinjo actually went off to Japan, became a great manager and also a model.
Matsui or the other guy that you
Shinjo.
met? Model like like dress model or?
Model. He was like a model. He was very flashy, and he had like a whole runway as a man. It was crazy. Like he did crazy stuff in Japan. He was a huge showman. He was a pretty good player, but he was a better showman.
Did he have like any like special showy things that he did while he was a baseball player?
I don't remember so much with the Mets, but I know back in Japan he was a big deal, more so for his management skills and how he entertained.
He had the opportunity to make a bedazzled Mets jersey during his time there, but
Well, I guess he just wasn't out of his shell yet, being in a different country and all.
that's true. And I did give an idea for anybody who's a Mets fan. Go make a bedazzled jersey. That's with that said, that brings us to the last question. What that is the end of our whether or not trivia and the end of our podcast episode and our conversation with you, Steven. But before we go, how can people find New York, New Jersey, PA weather and keep in touch with all the awesome work that you're doing in the meteorology world?
Sure. I'm on social media at X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and God knows whatever else pops up these days. The easiest way is to follow me at NYNJPA Weather.
And we'll make sure to include all of the social media handles for your social media accounts and then also your website as well in the show notes for everybody for their convenience. Well, with that said, thank you so much, Steven, for joining me on the podcast. And thank you to the listener for listening to the Everything Weather podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode.